Hi, I'm Rich Wynn.
And I'm Rebecca Nixon, and this is the PropTech Growth Podcast.
Every episode, we interview an expert in the PropTech startup space, gathering their advice and expertise to help you run a successful PropTech business.
I'm the Portable PropTech CMO, and I help PropTech startups build and scale their commercial growth strategy.
I'm Rich from Rich Wynn Consultancy. I specialise in operations, sales and process, helping fintechs and PropTech companies to grow.
So, I'm going to welcome Rob Hailstone to the PropTech Growth Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm wondering if you can start off with just a little bit of background about yourself and why you're chatting here with us today.
Sure. Okay. Well, I started my legal career way back in 1974 as a 16-year-old office boy in a law firm in Bristol. I worked there for 18 months, didn't do much real law, obviously, deliveries, etc. I left and then went into menswear for a year, which I really enjoyed. The reason I mentioned that is it taught me how to sell, and not many conveyancers know how to sell themselves or their service. So I did 12 months in menswear, which I really loved on a Saturday when it was busy, but during the week it was deadly, stock taking, window dressing. And when you're dressing a naked dummy in a window as an 18-year-old boy, it's not good for your street cred. So I decided to, whatever street cred I had, of course. So I decided to leave. I went back into the legal profession. I did 13 years with a firm in Bristol doing conveyancing. Then I moved to Exeter and carried on my conveyancing career down in the southwest until about 2005. In 2005, the Housing Act 2004 came in, which introduced home information packs to the country. I was a great believer in the packs, not the packs that the Act prescribed because they were faulty, but the fact that sellers should be providing upfront information and providing a pack when they put their property on the market. So I created an action group called HIPAC, Home Information Pack Action Group, not very original, and had a small article in the Law Society Gazette. About 100 firms contacted me, and I said, okay, membership fees, 30, 40, 50 pounds a month. Within a few months, I was earning more from that than I was from doing my conveyancing. And I thought, oh, I'd better start providing these people with some real support now because I hadn't really gone too far into the depth of the Housing Act. So I gave up my job, started going up and down to what was then the Deputy Prime Minister's office, immersed myself in the legislation. And I wanted to try and create an exchange-ready pack by adding more documents to the pack than were prescribed by the government. I was contacted by Oye Straker, big legal stationers, £160 million turnover company. They asked me up to London to explain what it was I was trying to do with HIPS. Bit of a Dragon's Den moment, 6 of them, 1 of me. After a few months, they said, okay, we like your concept, we like your idea. Let's set up a business together. You're now the CEO, go and rent a flat. You've got a company car, there's your office, you've got a board of directors, off we go. So I got in my car, drove back down to Devon, stopped off in Exeter, went into Waterstones and bought a book, What a CEO Does, because I had absolutely no idea what a CEO did. Actually, I should have got it off the shelf. It's still up there now. And we started producing packs for 2 or 3 years until they scrapped HIPS. It was going well. We knew the government was eventually going to scrap them. In my opinion, they should have suspended them, looked at what was going right, looked at what was going wrong, and changed them. We made our 12 staff redundant. Oye made myself and my wife redundant, and it was back to Devon with my tail between my legs. I didn't want to go back into conveyancing. I think most people who escape conveyancing rarely go back, particularly at the moment. So I set up the BOLD group. BOLD was supposed to stand, or does stand, for bundle of legal documents, because I still want to produce an exchange-ready pack, or I want somebody else to do it if possible. It was very difficult to grow a membership again. This was in the height of the recession. It was an awful time for me and my wife, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I stuck with it. Now we're at a level where we have 700 member firms, all different shapes and sizes, all do conveyancing. They pay an annual subscription, and I update them on anything and everything that's going on in the property market. In fact, they call me usually their ears, their eyes, and sometimes their voice. And it's a fantastic community, and it's growing all the time. I send out a weekly bulletin to them, but the jewel in our crown is now the fact that we have an online forum, and there's over 1,000 registered conveyancing users on there. They post questions all day, they answer questions all day, and it's just a brilliant forum, and the numbers are growing. We've got SDLT experts, we've got land registry people who partake, compliance experts. It's a 24/7 beast that never stops. In fact, I've got a bit of a tiger by the tail, but I just about have it under control. So that's where I am at the moment.
It's amazing. It sounds like you've had a really interesting journey to get where you are today.
And that's the pre-watershed version.
Well, listen, we're very relaxed here on the podcast. So if there's anything you want to say, you can just go ahead and say it.
We'll do I think.
we do have a language warning, so say whatever you like.
Yes.
It's all good. Can't offend me. I'm a Queenslander. It's not possible. So I'd love to hear a bit more about technology and conveyancing, because we've had a lot of discussions on the podcast with people who are in different ways connected to the conveyancing process. Everyone seems to agree that there are, for lack of a kinder expression, shed loads of issues, and there are so many people who are looking to technology to try and address those issues in conveyancing. And I'd really love to hear your view on tech in conveyancing as it stands today.
Okay, before I started, I probably should have explained to the viewer, I am working from the old Signalman's Railway box on Torquay Railway Station, and yes, that is a train. In fact, it's the 215th Paddington, and that is a budgie there, but I won't go into why I've got a budgie in the office. Anyway, going back to tech, well, I left before tech really took hold, I think, back in, as I say, 2004, 2005. So I'm a little bit of a dinosaur myself when it comes to tech. I think what I do know is, with a wide range of firms like I've got, as I said, about 700, I think most of those are tech savvy and employ the latest tech that they can get. But you've got to remember that there are close to 4,000 conveyancing firms out there. Excuse me. And I reckon about 3,000 of them are probably not tech savvy. Lots still don't have a CRM system, let alone any other kind of technology. So this is why they call it a cottage industry. You've got the top ones who are modern and efficient. I'm not saying the other ones are not efficient, but they're efficient in a different way, perhaps. And I think we need to drag what we call the long tail of firms into the 21st century and get them using technology more, such as digital signatures, etc., etc. So it's a difficult one. And of course, different firms use different tech. It doesn't always, go together well, some of the tech solutions, unfortunately. And there are new tech solutions coming out every day of the week. There's always a new game changer, but of course, very few appear to be, in fact, they're not yet, a game changer. Maybe one day there will be a game changer.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think the passion that PropTech founders have for their creations, their babies, their businesses, is to be admired. It's remarkable, and they need that passion and that dedication, but it can sometimes be a little bit blinding, because everybody does think that they've got the game changer that's going to fix everything, or at least fix one aspect of the process to the point where they're going to be, in the history books, as it were, as having changed how it all works. But very rarely does that actually happen.
We have got some new companies out there, and I'm not picking anybody because they're favourites, but they sort of come from your neck of the woods. So we've got Leap and InfoTrack, and they've made big inroads in the last 3, 4, 5 years, and people are using their technology along with other companies as well. So it is happening. It is beginning to change and improve, but it's a very, very slow process.
Well, it has to be, because so much of the process is still so manual and requires so much human intervention. There's only so much that tech can do to change it, but hopefully we're making some progress. Can you tell me a bit about your 25-point list on how to fix conveyancing?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, it's not actually my list. It's a list that came from my members. So I emailed them and said, look, what are the biggest problems that you're facing today? And I think they sent in a list of about 30, 35. So I picked the top 25 and put them in a document and put them out on social media, etc. And it got some coverage. I've actually put together my top 10 about half an hour ago. So I think I can talk you through my top 10, if that's okay. I'm just
please.
Have a quick look at the document. So I'm still looking at the screen, but just to remind myself what my top 10 are.
That's fine.
The first one is very of the moment, and it's to provide clear guidance as soon as possible on how conveyancers should deal with the Building Safety Act. Now, this is a relatively new Safety Act 2022. This is a relatively new issue, probably started at the beginning of this year. It's a huge problem. Law firms don't know what to do, how to act, who to act for. Some won't act on leasehold properties at all. Some won't act on leasehold properties when they're 5 stories or 11 meters high. Some won't act where there's certain lenders involved. It just goes on. And some will act, but they will increase their fees substantially, sometimes by £1,000 or more. And I think there's probably about 50, maybe 60% of firms out there at the moment who are not acting on most leasehold transactions. If that's not addressed soon, there will be longer conveyancing times. They're long enough at the moment because there's usually one leasehold transaction in every chain, or at least in every other chain. And of course, the chain only goes as fast as any leasehold transaction. So we could see a real, backlog of transactions in the next 3 to 6 months if it's not addressed. There are a number of trainers out there providing courses on the Building Safety Act. Unfortunately, they're not yet singing from the same hymn sheet, so that's confusing for the delegates who go to the courses. And I know that groups like the Home Buying and Selling Group and the Law Society are looking at this and possibly making representations to the government, but I think that will take a long time, and it might even need a slight change in legislation to put this right. It's a massive issue. So when I put it on the list, I would say it probably was number 1, but now it's number 1 in flashing bright red neon lights. It's massive. In fact, the biggest thing I think to hit conveyancing in my nearly 50-year career, and somebody called it recently a car crash piece of legislation. So needs addressing. But there are other issues.
Yes, all right, let's go to number 2 then.
Okay, well, if we can put that to one side, although this follows on quite nicely, because number 2 on my list is a unification of instructions and requirements from all lenders. So as all conveyancers will know, there's the UK Finance Lenders Handbook, Part 1, which is standard. Then there's Part 2, which the lenders put their own requirements in. And that's a big problem, particularly with the Building Safety Act, with a couple of lenders, as I touched on. But when they change their Part 2s, they don't really tell the conveyancing profession. They don't publicize it anywhere, and they change them differently. You know, one might change one thing one day, one might change something else the next day. It's a minefield for lawyers to keep hold of. They have to keep looking and checking every time they get a new mortgage offer from a lender. Have they changed their Part 2? So that's again another big issue, but one that unfortunately has been with us for a long time. So I just carry on through the list. You stop me if you want.
Yeah. If I've got questions, I'll interrupt you.
Please. Number 3 is to tackle the issues with regard to leasehold, managing agents, and the completion and return of LPE1. So, basically getting the management packs from the managing agent when you're trying to sell a freehold property for a client. They take a long time. They cost a lot of money. Sometimes the client is held to ransom until they pay that money. Again, that's an issue that's been going on for a long time. And all of these issues cause delays, and all those delays reverberate up and down the chain. And I think transaction times now are as long as they've ever been. I think on average, 5-6 months maybe. What is bizarre is that when I started, 70s and 80s, we had no internet as such, no email. It was unregistered land. We did personal completions, and yet it was quicker, less stressful, and more efficient then than it is now. So
I believe the standard used to be a month.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. And if it wasn't done in a month, it went back on the market.
Yeah, so-called progress, we're in the 21st century, and we're probably doing early 19th century, 20th century conveyancing now. It's ridiculous. But that's because of many of these problems. And I often say now that when I was doing conveyancing, I probably had, 7 to 10 big plates to keep spinning at any one time. Conveyancers now have, I think, 20, 25 or more plates to keep spinning. Maybe it's not quite so technical legally because land is registered, and sometimes that is a little bit easier than unregistered. But the challenges they've got now are completely different to the ones that I had back in the 20th century. And they just keep growing. And there has to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. And in my opinion, it could be the Building Safety Act that is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And something has to be done about the amount of work that's being put on conveyancers. So number 4, reduce the backlog at the land registry. As any conveyancer will know, there's a massive backlog of registrations. Some registrations now apparently won't be completed until 2024-25. Conveyancers get chased by lenders or the panel managers on a weekly, monthly, whatever it might be basis. It's a waste of everybody's time. So please, HMLR, stop creating new products and services until you've got your backlog cleared. And that's required pretty much every conveyancer in the land, I would say.
And every home buyer and seller as well, I'm sure.
It's unusual because if you're not selling your property, you won't know that your purchase hasn't been registered, so it won't bother you too much. If you remortgage, then there's a problem. And of course, if you do come to sell and it's not registered, that will be a problem. Excuse me, the land registry will expedite transactions, not always as quickly as they would like, but it's the interfering with the conveyances on a weekly and daily basis. Is the registration back? No, it's not. It's at the land registry. They say the same old thing week in and week out. It's a crazy situation. I should have numbered these points because I'm losing my place now. But number 5, I think, is reduce the number of interruptions conveyancers receive throughout the working day. And I don't think really that's changed since I was doing conveyancing. I used to start very early. I still do actually, but I used to start about 5 in the morning. I get the post, I get the DX, open all the posts and DX. I would work on the post up until about 9 o'clock. Then from 9 till 5, I probably would see clients, answer phone calls, talk to agents, talk to brokers. I rarely did any real legal work during the day. 5 o'clock came, I'd do another 2 hours in the evening. And then on weekends, I'd probably do another 5 or 10 hours. It hasn't got any better than that. Again, 21st century, there must be some kind of PropTech out there that can keep the client and or the agent and the broker and everybody else updated and stop the interruptions that conveyancers get all day. Maybe they would then have a normalish working day of 8:30 to 5:30 and not many hours on the weekend. And the problem we've got, because we had a very busy period throughout the pandemic, a very, very busy period, and there weren't enough law firms to do the work, basically, a lot of conveyancers are now giving up. So some are just too stressed, their well-being isn't great, some are retiring early, some are going to new careers, etc., etc. We have a problem brewing there as well, as I think, and that is too many going out the top end, not enough new, young, fresh blood coming at the bottom end. That could be a problem in another 6 or 12 months' time as well, if the job doesn't become more attractive, appealing, and perhaps slightly less stressful.
Oh, particularly these days, people are looking for a healthy work-life balance. People are prioritizing their mental and physical health more than ever. And everyone wants to be productive. Everyone wants to do a good job for their employer and be great at what they do. But you can't do that if you're tired and stressed all the time, and nobody wants to do that sort of job. It's just not going to be sustainable for more than a few years.
Yeah, it is difficult for the client because you might be one in a chain of 5 or 6 or even more, and sometimes it feels like you're in a black hole and no one's telling you anything. So you want to know what's going on. I know that HMLR tried to produce a chain view many years ago, and others have tried. We haven't yet got one that is used nationwide. But I think a good chain view would be good as well, that the client can look at, the agent can look at, the broker can look at. Maybe the lawyers need to update it or not. We perhaps should revisit that, or publicize the ones that are out there a little bit more than they are being used. So they're used more often than they are, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the next one, agents and conveyancers to provide more information up front. And I link 2 together here, and get conveyancers involved earlier in the process. So really, we're going back to my hot topic, or my favorite topic, and that is information up front. I thought it back in 2004-5. I still think that's one way forward. It's not a silver bullet. There are no silver bullets, unfortunately. But my view is, if a seller instructs their conveyancer when they market the property, so if they instructed me and said, look, Rob, I'm selling a property, put it on the market. I said, great. I'll say, great. I'll open the file. I get the AML done, the ID checks done. Excuse me, I get a copy of the deeds from the land registry. I'd probably get them to complete a questionnaire. I might go even further than that. I might have a quick look at the title to see if there's any problems that need addressing. You could even carry out searches and try and pass them on to the buyer solicitor. I know there's issues with that, but there are ways around it. And if you've got all that information sitting on a shelf ready, when the buyer comes along, You just take the pack off the shelf, it's not on the shelf obviously anymore, and you send it out to the buyer's conveyancer. You've saved 2 or 3 weeks. And the other thing I think is, from a conveyancer's point of view, I would rather be building that pack and addressing those problems before the chain goes live, because I haven't got the world and his wife chasing me. No one's worried about a transaction that hasn't started, so I can get all that ready, put it on the shelf, send it out. Hopefully 80-90% of the questions are solved. My life as a conveyancer will be a lot easier. The transaction will be a lot faster. What's not to like? But lots and lots of conveyancers don't like it. I don't really understand why. Maybe they're a bit averse to change, which I understand. But I think that's what's going to happen in the future. We've now got, excuse me, trading standards introducing new material information. So when somebody puts a property on the market, the agent or the companies like Rightmove and Super have to put information on the site explaining what the broadband capacity is like, mobile signals, and even goes deeper than that. You'll have easements on there and covenants. And I think those easements and covenants, if they're put on display early on, will need explaining, because some people might walk away and think, I do want to put a white van on the drive, but I can't. That might not be an enforceable covenant. So let's get both sets of lawyers involved in the transaction earlier on. I think it's coming. I hope it's coming before I drop off my perch, excuse the budgie pun, but I would love to see it happen.
That sounds great. I think from the conversations that we've been having on the podcast with various people involved in the conveyancing process, there is definitely a unified theme around more information up front. There is definitely resistance to change on that front. You've spoken a bit about people who currently work in conveyancing and their workload and stress level. Change management within that environment is going to be difficult, even if there is a desire to embrace the change. So that in and of itself is going to be a challenge. On the seller side and the agent side, we've talked to people about the reluctance there being a fear around less interest in properties that have upfront information, which of course is a pretty unhealthily founded fear, given that you're basing your hope on a property selling around a lack of information for the customer and hoping that they'll just fall in love with the house, and then they find out all the truth, all of the problems with the building, and just, oh well, go ahead with it anyway, which often ends up causing problems further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, there are some definite, genuine barriers to information up front that we need to overcome. And one is the agent needs to explain to the seller why they should have a pack put together. Someone's going to charge for that pack, so you have to look at addressing who pays for it and when and how much it is. But all these barriers can be overcome if there's a willingness from all parties. And at the moment, there isn't a willingness, unfortunately, from all parties. I hope it will come. If it doesn't, I can't see transaction times improving anytime soon, unfortunately.
Point well made.
Sorry.
Point well made.
Yeah, thank you. I think the next one on my list is chain sheets to be provided by presumably estate agents. So you're in a chain of 8, 9, 10. You don't know who else is in the chain, where they are. I was involved in a chain many years ago. It was very long, about 13, 14 long. And I was at the top selling a probate property. It was going nowhere fast. I was trying to chase down the chain to find out what the hold up was. Couldn't get any answers from anybody. So I eventually chased right the way down to the bottom of the chain. It took me about 2 weeks, only to find I'm at the bottom, acting for a first-time buyer who's waiting for their mortgage offer, which is fair enough. At least I knew what was causing the delay. What I didn't know was it was my client causing the delay. So if we have that information, it would be useful. I think it's also useful to know which law firms are involved in the transaction and where, because some are quicker than others. And if you spot them, you might know if that could be where the blockage might be as a transaction proceeds. So please, agents, change sheets. Why not? A new one, make owning a logbook, a property logbook compulsory. So there are some logbook companies out there now. You've got the Residential Logbook Association, which has recently been formed. So basically, at the end of your transaction, all the documents your lawyer's got and other documents go into a logbook. that logbook is added to whilst you're living at the property with new planning permissions and guarantees, etc. When you put your property on the market in the future, you get the logbook out, you produce it, and I guess it becomes some kind of seller's pack already formed. You just put some additional documents with it that are relevant, time relevant, copy deeds, etc., and you've got a pack ready to go. So, you top and tail it with information up front and property logbooks at the end, and you are really, really getting somewhere, in my opinion.
I completely agree. We actually had a guest on the podcast who compared it to owning a car. If you go to buy a car, you get a copy of the logbook, when it's been serviced, who's owned it, and if it's been in any accidents. When you go to buy a house, no information. And you have to go digging around for it. And the seller has to dig around. I mean, we bought this house from somebody who lived in it for a quarter of a century, and her husband had dealt with all of the paperwork to do with the house, and he passed away. So she had to go through all of his files and try and find when was the boiler replaced and when was that bit of foundation fixed or that wall moved. And it was just an absolute nightmare. She couldn't find any of this information, which made it very difficult for us to buy the property. We ended up doing it anyway. But I think for a lot of people on both sides of the transaction, it's such a painful process. Even if you're not selling a house, let's say that you're just doing the general upkeep and maintenance of your largest asset financially, you really should have all of that information recorded somewhere for your own records, even if you never sell the house, let alone if you are going to.
Well, famously, we always used to keep all our papers like that in a shoebox in the loft. But of course, we didn't put the papers in there when we needed to. We put one in a drawer somewhere else, one somewhere else. And like you say, you couldn't find them. And again, even the 21st century, I think a lot of people maybe not put them in a shoebox, but do something similar. So yeah, property logbooks, please, all the way.
Right.
Another nice improvement or good improvement would be the way completions take place, normally on a Friday, not always. Again, you've got a chain of 5, 6, 7, 8. So lawyer A at the bottom sends off the money, 10, 11 o'clock. It doesn't get to lawyer 5 or 6 or F or G at the top until 4, 5, 6 in the afternoon. So people are waiting in vans. Sometimes it doesn't complete at the top of the chain. That's a ridiculous situation to be in, again, in the 21st century. We should be able to press a button so that completion takes place at, say, 12, 1 or 2 o'clock throughout the chain. And everybody packs their van up in the morning, starts leaving their house at 1 o'clock, gets to the new house at 2 o'clock and moves in the afternoon, and then gets the champagne out in the evening, and everybody's happy. People are looking into solutions. The Bank of England's looking at it, I believe, and companies like PEX are looking into things like that. It will come, but not soon enough, unfortunately. Have you ever been in that same situation? You said.
Luckily, no. We were first-time buyers, and the seller was moving in with a family member. So we had no chain in either direction. So we were able to turn the whole thing around in a few months, which even just sounds ridiculous because it should have taken a day, really, in terms of like what actually needed to be done. But our neighbours who live down the road, it took them a year and a half to go through that process.
Yeah, it is a nightmare. And, if you've got young kids and it's raining and you're stuck in a van or stuck in a car, it's an absolute nightmare. It takes away the enjoyment that you should be feeling on that day and over the weekend. And people don't move partly because of those bad experiences. So the average time used to be people would move on, I think, on average every 7 years. It's now every 20 years. That's not the only reason why. There's many reasons why, but it could be one of the reasons why. So yeah, let's get the money transferred at the same time on completion date, please.
Yeah, we intentionally bought this exact property because we thought, dear God, we never, ever, ever want to move again. It's so stressful. It's such a nightmare. Just the moving, let alone the conveyancing. And we were like, we're only going to do this once, and then that's it.
It is a difficult process. Taking the legal part out of it, like you say, the physical aspects of it is very important as well. What you want is a completely smooth legal process. That would help.
Yes, it would help a lot.
And if not a quicker transaction, I think earlier certainty, so getting an earlier exchange of contracts even if you don't want to move for another month or so, that's fine. Once you've got certainty, you can't be gazumped and you can't be gazumped.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my number 10 out of the list of 25 is quite a controversial one, really. And again, they're not all mine anyway, but ban completely or limit the amount allowed to be paid by way of referral fee from a conveyancer to an estate agent. Now, this is a very hot topic, and it does divide the legal community. Lots of firms pay referral fees. They say instead of marketing their services, they just pay the agent, which is fine in some cases. Others call it a bribe. When I was working back in the 70s and 80s, I knew lawyers, and it wasn't me, who would actually hand over bags of cash to estate agents once a month for the 5 or 6 transactions that have been introduced to them. And my worry is now, if it's banned completely, if referral fees are banned completely, and I don't think they will be, it will go underground again. It might not be bags of cash, but there will be something going on behind the scenes that is not transparent. At the moment, referral fees are supposed to be transparent. The agent's supposed to tell the clients, the buyer and seller, and of course the conveyancer, the solicitor is supposed to do that. I think the only reasonable, workable solution is to maybe have a cap on the amount of referral fee that is paid to an estate agent or an introducer of, say, 5 or 10 or 15% of the conveyancing fee. Because sometimes you'll quote a conveyancing fee of, say, 8, 9, 1,000, 100, £1,000, and a referral fee could be £300, £400, £500. And the client doesn't always know that. So at the end of the day, they're getting a £500 service, having paid a £1,000 fee, and that doesn't seem right. So my solution, whether it's workable or not, but anybody who's listening in power, just put a cap on the referral fee. Then you can pay it if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But it won't go underground again. So that is a bit of a miserable top 10, but that's my top 10.
I think that's great though. You're calling for transparency on every side of the equation, and transparency equals speed. So we've seen that with open banking. It's just time for the property industry to catch up, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's really, really cool. It's got me thinking. It's really interesting. Okay, great. I know that you wouldn't position yourself as a PropTech expert. That's one of the reasons we want to have you on the show, because it's important to not just exist in our own little bubble of everyone doing PropTech with each other. We need to learn from people who are experts in closely related fields. And I would love to hear a bit about your take on whether you feel PropTech is currently a help or a hindrance when it comes to getting upfront information, if you're seeing anything emerge that you think is significant, but if you have no comment, that's also fine too.
Well, I think there are a few companies who are trying to create an upfront information system. TM with Mio, I think InfoTrack are doing something similar, and there are other companies out there, maybe Vea and a few others. I should know them all, but can't think of them on the top of my head. So they are trying to do something, and part of this is on the back of the new material information changes that are coming. I think more people will be coming to the market with upfront information PropTech solutions. So, I mean, you don't need one to provide upfront information. If your client instructs you, you just get a pack together. PropTech might help and put the pack in a nice format and get the information together source quicker, cheaper possibly. And I know the Home Buying and Selling Group are working on this. They're very, very keen on upfront information, and they've got their pledge and et cetera, et cetera. So in fact, I chaired a meeting on upfront information about 2 weeks ago when we had National Conveyancing Week, which I dreamt up and others helped me put together. It was a good 2-hour debate where I think some of the issues were tackled and hopefully answered about upfront information. So if anybody wants to see that session, they can get that via, well, if they email me, rh@boldgroup.co.uk, I'll send them a link to that upfront information discussion. But again, I think it's coming, but it's like pushing jelly uphill at the moment.
That's a great analogy and great visual. Yeah, so people can email you. You shared your email address. If you want to, we can put a link in the show notes. But if you would prefer people email you so that you have their contact details, that's also fine as well, whichever works for you.
I don't mind. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you. You can do both. That'd be great. Yeah.
Great. So our listeners can find the link in their show notes, and get in touch with Rob for more information on that conversation. Question: can the Law Society do more to help the property industry and the conveyancing process?
Well, I think if you ask a number of solicitors, they would say yes. They do feel a little bit left out by the Law Society, forgotten, legal activity to a degree. I know they do things behind the scenes. They're not always that vocal about it, and perhaps they're not always that quick about it. They have procedures to go through. They've got the conveyancing quality scheme, which does work it as well as it should do. It should be policed a bit more and enforced a bit more, but it's a great start. Yes, they should be doing more, I think, but I know that they are trying to do more behind the scenes. So I wouldn't castigate them completely. No, it's a complicated thing for them. I know two or three people within the organisation who really do work hard to try and get these things out in front of their conveyancing community.
I really, really appreciate your time today. It's been very insightful. And there's definitely a number of unified voices that are coming through with you on the issues that need to be addressed in conveyancing. Very encouraging and challenging.
Well, if an old dinosaur like me can say these things, hopefully the young bucks and buckesses out there will pick up the baton and run with them and improve things for everybody.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for joining us on the PropTech Growth Podcast. To learn more, you can find us on LinkedIn or email proptechpodcast@icloud.com. See you next time.